This day in sports history. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little bit more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more podcasts, more info, and also giveaways, which I'll talk about in just a few moments at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's February 11th, and on this day in 2002, there was controversy in the figure skating world, and this time, it had nothing to do with Tonya Harding. This was the 2002 Winter Olympic Games in Salt Lake City, and the event was the pairs figure skating competition. Entering the night's final free skate portion, the Russian pair of Elena Bereshnaya and Anton Sikralitsa were in first place after their short program. The Canadian couple of Jamie Salé and David Pelletier were a close second. Issues actually started in the warm-up for this event, with a number of skaters on the ice prior to the start of the program. Bereshnaya and Sikralitsa were practicing skating at full speed and setting up to practice one of their tricky elements, when Salé, also on the ice warming up, skating backwards, setting up for a triple toe loop, crashed into Sikralitsa. Jamie fell to the ice, while Anton was able to stay upright. They were both shaken, but uninjured. It was a strange start to the night. Minutes later, Bereshnaya and Sikralitsa took the ice for what was described as a very difficult program. The Russians had skated this program before, but they had never skated it cleanly in competition. And sure enough, there was a minor deduction when Sikralitsa stepped out of a double axel. It was enough of a deduction that both the American and Canadian broadcast teams said that if Pelletier and Salé skated a clean program, they would win gold. And they did. They skated their program cleanly. And when they sat to watch the numbers, they were rated higher than the Russians on technical merit, but for presentation, they fell short of the Bereshnaya and Sikralitsa 7 scores of 5.9 with their 4. They needed a fifth 5.9 on presentation to overcome their short program deficit. As soon as the numbers flashed up, showing the Canadian pair had finished second, questions were raised.
How did that happen? They won that program. There's not a doubt anyone in the place except for maybe a few judges.
I look at my coach and I go, it's going to switch, right? Because I really thought it's impossible.
Not impossible, but almost immediately, questions began to be asked and the investigation narrowed quickly on the French judge, Marie Rennes-Lagugne. She was soon confronted by the chair of the International Skating Union's Technical Committee, demanding an explanation. It didn't take long for Lagugne to admit she'd been pressured by the head of the French National Skating Federation to vote for the Russians.
The French judge broke down into tears and started crying and saying, "You don't understand what pressure I'm under."
Allegedly, it had been a quid pro quo arrangement with the Russian Federation to help the French ice dancing pair in their competition a few days later. Lagugne later denied her admission.
As soon as I had put down my pen, I started to suffer from a series of attacks, physical, verbal, and the worst, moral. I was trapped, and people behaved toward me in a manner worthy of a police dictatorship. This led me to say what these people wanted me to say. So, because of my emotional state, I couldn't take it anymore. I broke down.
But the pressure continued to mount from Canadian and American media. 4 days later, an agreement was finally reached. The Russian pair kept their gold medals since they were not involved in any of the pressure tactics themselves, while the Canadian pair of Peltier and Sallee were upgraded from the silver to the gold medal. Laguna, along with the head of the French National Skating Federation, were suspended for 3 years for their roles in the scandal. The controversy did eventually lead to a revamped scoring system 2 years later that took the subjectivity out of the process and created a more mathematical score based on execution of the key elements. Hey, I needed to call a quick timeout to let you know that we're giving away a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. Have a favorite college sports team? Of course you do. You're listening to a sports podcast. Well, Homefield Apparel has all the great gear so you can support your team in style. Jerseys, hoodies, hats, and a whole lot more are available in your team's colors and insignias. So go to sportshistorynetwork.com/giveaways for your chance at a $50 gift card to Homefield Apparel. I've also put a link in the show notes. Now, let's get back out there. We've got more of this episode to do. On this day in 1990, it was one of the biggest upsets in sports history, if not the biggest, as Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. The fight was held in Tokyo. Tyson was an undefeated 37-0 and the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. Not only had he not lost a fight, he had never been knocked down. He became the heavyweight champ 2 years earlier after knocking out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds in the Once and For All fight. In the fight prior to this one, he knocked out Carl the Truth Williams in 93 seconds. So people were not lasting long in the ring with Iron Mike, and everybody was expecting another first-round knockout for Tyson. The fight against Douglas was supposed to be a tune-up for an anticipated meetup with Evander Holyfield, who had just bumped up to heavyweight, and he had a ringside seat for this fight. And by at least one account, Tyson was looking past Douglas. Singer Bobby Brown included a story in his biography about partying with Tyson the night before, which rolled over into the morning of the fight. At one point, Brown reminded Tyson about the fight he had later that night and maybe he should get some sleep. Tyson apparently responded with, "This dude's an amateur. I could beat him if I didn't sleep for 5 weeks." Side note, if Bobby Brown is the one sounding like the responsible adult in the room, maybe you should ask yourself some introspective, self-probing questions and kind of look into the choices that you're making. Just saying. All right, so back to the fight. Vegas was not even touching this fight. Only one casino put odds on it, with Douglas listed as a 42-1 underdog. But Buster was a worthy challenger. He was in the top 10 of heavyweight challengers at this point. He entered the fight with a respectable 29-4 record, with 19 of those wins coming by knockout. He had 6 inches in height on Tyson, and he had the reach advantage by 12 inches. Douglas showed some punch early, connecting with jabs enough to swell Tyson's eye by the 6th round. In the 8th, though, it looked like Tyson had ceased toying with the mouse and moved in for the kill, landing a right uppercut that stunned Douglas and sent him to the mat. Buster only managed to get to his feet after a 9 count, and then was saved by the bell to end the round to allow him to regroup and remember where he was. But this is where the controversy of this fight comes in. Referee Octavio Myron's count was slow.
And there's a right hand uppercut, and down goes Douglas. As suddenly as that.
Can he beat the count?
He got a little overconfident. Got a little loosey-goosey. Still wobbly. Let's see what Mike can do to finish. And the bell ends to save Buster Douglas at the end of round 8.
Now, it is a 10 count, not exactly a 10-second count, but it should be kind of close to 10 seconds. Instead, Myron's count to 9 took 13 seconds, with Douglas just beating the count to 10. Coming out of their corners to start the 10th round, Douglas took advantage of what looked like a tired Tyson, landing a series of jabs, and then he stung him with an uppercut. That opened him up, and Douglas pounced with a 4-punch combination that sent Tyson to the mat.
Rolling willingly just to try to get in the shot that will finish things in.
Oh, the uppercut.
What an uppercut by Douglas, and down goes Tyson.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It's over. It's over.
Mike Tyson has been knocked out.
Unbelievable.
It was the first time in his career that Iron Mike found himself down on the canvas. He was visibly hurt, and he tried to stagger to his feet in time to beat the count, but it was a split second too late. Buster Douglas had shocked the world, not just the boxing world, but the world in general, with his 10th round knockout of Tyson. However, Tyson's promoter, Don King, immediately protested the fight, pointing to the long count that Myron had given Douglas in the 8th. The WBA and the WBC both agreed that the count was extended, but the public outcry in support of Douglas's win grew louder. The protest was withdrawn, and Douglas's victory became official 4 days later. His career did not last much longer, however. His next fight as the undisputed heavyweight champ was against Evander Holyfield, who knocked Douglas out in the 3rd round. Douglas retired after that fight. A long-rumored rematch with Tyson never materialized, and they never met again in the ring. On this day in 1994, NASCAR driver Neil Bonnett died during a practice run at Daytona International Speedway. Bonnett was one of the members of the Alabama gang that consisted of race car drivers Red Farmer, Bobby Allison, Donnie Allison, and Davey Allison. For Neil, Bobby was like a second dad, and Davey, a brother. He grew up with racing in his blood and a desire to be behind the wheel of a race car. He won 18 times on the Winston Cup circuit. On April 1st, 1990, Bonnett was involved in a multi-car wreck at Darlington that sent him to the hospital. A severe head injury caused him to suffer from amnesia. He didn't recognize his wife, his children, or his best friend, Dale Earnhardt. It took a few weeks and a remembrance of a hunting trip he'd taken with Dale to unlock his memory and get back on the road to recovery. He retired from race car driving at that point, and he began hosting a NASCAR-themed television show. But the desire to get back behind the wheel started to creep back in. He was finally cleared to come back to racing in 1993, with his first race set for Alabama's Talladega Superspeedway. In that race, he spun and went airborne into the front stretch catch fence before barrel rolling his car down to the infield. He was able to walk away from that horrific crash uninjured, and in fact made it up to the broadcast booth to call the rest of the race on television. He sat out most of the rest of that season, but the lure to climb back in a race car was just too strong, and he returned to fire up the engine for the last race of the year at Atlanta in order to help Earnhardt win the points championship. Now here at the start of the '94 season, Bonnett was back at the racetrack preparing for the season-opening Daytona 500. He had a 6-race deal for the year, and he was excited to be in the number 51 Country Time Chevrolet. It was the first practice session at Daytona, and Bonnett was running it wide open when the car broke loose in turn 4. The car banked hard left, and then a correction back to the right sent his car into the wall, nearly head-on. The initial cause of the wreck was attributed to oil on the track between 3 and 4, but that was soon ruled out. Another factor considered were the tires on his car. He was running Hoosier tires instead of Goodyear's, and after a near-fatal wreck the day before, followed by another fatal crash 3 days after Neil's, with all of those cars running Hoosiers, it was speculated something was wrong with those tires. The Hoosier Tire Company even pulled all of their tires from the race that week. But the cause of the wreck was later determined to be due to a broken shock mount. Tuning the shocks to a dangerous point allowed the car to ride lower, to decrease drag. Neil Bonnett was 47 years old. And on this day in 1988, Dave Tiger Williams was released by the Hartford Whalers, effectively ending his career. What, you don't know Dave Williams? Well, let's just say he was known for being a fighter who played a little bit of hockey.
Oh, now Ben Wilson and Tiger Williams.
Ben Wilson and Tiger Williams.
Ben Wilson hasn't been able to get a punch in. Tiger Williams is, now he's starting to throw the punches. Tiger Williams is getting some very good punches in on Ben Wilson. Now it's Wilson's turn.
Williams holds the NHL record for the most penalty minutes of any player to ever skate in the National Hockey League. Excluding the playoffs, Williams spent 3,971 minutes in the penalty box in his 14-year career. Dale Hunter is in second place on that list, and he had 400 less minutes in 450 more games. For Tiger, fighting was an important part of the game.
The good thing about fighting is that you can restore respect, and that's something that you need in the game. I want to make sure that Sittler scores a goal and win the game, because that makes my job easier and makes my life easier.
He wasn't a prolific goal scorer, but he did have a couple of 30-goal seasons, with his best being a 35-goal season in '81 with Vancouver. Of course, he led the league in penalty minutes that season too, with 343. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Even though hippos are herbivores, they're extremely aggressive and are responsible for an average of 500 deaths around the globe each year. And in case you're wondering how that compares to sharks, typically the number of people killed by sharks each year is around 10. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.